Well, hello everybody. I'm in the process of fitting up the driver's side door. It's very hot here in sunny Adelaide. It's going to be 44 degrees today before a cool change tomorrow, so it's going to be too hot to work out here. So it's about 6 o'clock in the morning and I'm just having a little early start. The door, this has given me no pleasure, I might add. It's a question of one step forward and 2 steps back a little bit. The gaps are pretty good. You can see, they're fairly consistent, but there's a problem. And the problem is that this door sits proud there along the bottom by about, I don't know, 3/16 of an inch, something like that. So it would appear to me that the contour of this dogleg doesn't match the contour of the door. Now, I don't quite know how that got through when I was fitting the panels up. Maybe I just was living on hope that I could sort it when I put them all together. But it really needs a little bit of cutting and welding, unfortunately. Now, I suppose I could live with it. Some people would say it's okay. I'm just not that happy with it, and I think it would bug me. So, of course, if I cut and weld, it means I'm going to damage the paint. So what I intend to do, and I'm not sure whether this will work or not, but we'll see. What I intend to do is to make a series of little V cuts on this flange so that I can then pull this panel out slightly. I'll put the panel on the car and tack these back together again and take them off and weld them. And if I go slowly and carefully, I might minimize the paint damage on this here, but certainly there'll be a little bit of respraying that's necessary, I feel. So that's the plan for this morning, and maybe I'm being a bit too fussy, I don't know, but I just think that the door fits are really important, and I think that would annoy me. And yep, it's a few extra hours work and a little bit of a setback on the car, but I've been working on this car for 3 years now, and I don't think that an extra day or so is going to make a lot of difference. So I think it's probably a good idea to try and correct that now. Well, after quite a bit of judicious cutting and shaping and pressing, that is now actually pretty darn good. And what I have to do now is to weld up those little cuts that I made. I'll put a piece of brass in behind there just to act as a bit of a heat sink, and then I'll just tack them and then take the guard off and finish welding, and then respray. It's actually come up pretty well, except for a few little marks around there which will sand out. Well, after some cutting and some grinding, realistically probably only about a couple of hours work, and this is in primer at the moment. That's why there's a different colour on there. That's actually the primer coat, but you can see it matches the line of the door very nicely, and I think that was a couple of hours really well spent. It's not totally set up yet, and I've still got some work to do on it, but the gap's pretty good and the match there is terrific, so I'm really pleased with that. I think that was really worth the effort to save myself constantly looking at the car in the future and wishing I'd done it properly in the first time. So that's really quite a nice edge along there now. Matches in beautifully, and although the guard's not fitted on perfectly, I can do a little bit of final fettling. So I guess there's a lesson to be learnt there. Make sure all the panels fit before you paint them, because although it's not that hard to repair the paint because it is acrylic lacquer, it's just a bit of a nuisance. So there we go, all pretty good, and I think when that's all finished painting and buffed and put on, that will look very nice. And it does look very nice. I think it was well worth spending the time getting that profile right. It's still not 100%, but certainly good enough to pass. So that was time well spent, a little bit of welding and painting before I fitted the guard on. And the rear guard now is completely fitted. So that's good.
The other thing that has happened, there are a few other little bits and pieces I've put together. The other thing is that I now have door latches on there which operate very nicely. Now, I did think when I put those on that they were going to give me quite a lot of trouble, but they didn't. They really went together very easily. I put them back in the original holes, and I thought because I'd done some welding on the car, possibly they were going to be a bit of a fight, but they went in place and latched up first time. Certainly easier than the MGAs. They have a little shim, aluminium shim underneath, about 1.2 millimeters thick, around about 60 thou, I guess, which appears to be original, and both sides have that, so I put that back in there in place. They have a shim underneath this raised section here, which is designed so that it doesn't crush up when you tighten up the screws, and there's a tapping plate on the back that the 4 screws go into. You can see I've replaced the aluminium. I wanted to use the original, but it was too far gone. This is from Kilmartin's in Ballarat in Australia, where I buy a lot of my stuff. I know I'm hoping for some sort of free cash back on all this advertising, but they make terrific products, and I'm just zooming in a little bit there to show you the pressing. And Greg Kilmartin tells me that they have actually made their own stamps and they press that up themselves because it's not available, that pattern's not available, and it is identical to the original. These came to me all folded up and everything and fitting, but a little bit too big around the exterior profile, and there were a few little bits of trimming that I needed to do. So that took me about 2 hours, I suppose, per side. To do that, I went very carefully and slowly with files and little saws and snippers and things to make sure that I didn't take off too much aluminium, because of course you can't put it back on again. So they've turned out really well. They look very pretty. They're held in place, as you will know, by these little screws here, little self-tappers, which run along the edge there and around the top. Now you'll also see the black piping there, which these cars had. I don't think it's a draft excluder as such. I really just think it's to neaten off the aluminium edging. It is supposed to go right around here. I couldn't do that because I discovered that when I did do it, the door fouled on it as it was closing. Once it was closed, it was fine, but it was just touching it as it closed up. I couldn't see any way out of that, so I decided to terminate it just here. And when I put the aluminium stripping on the inside here, I might put a little bit of black vinyl around there just to sort of please the eye a little bit more. The door is slightly tighter at the top. I guess there's a little bit of frame sag, probably only to be expected. I'm not concerned about it because when I jacked up the rear of the car, underneath the rear of the chassis with a block of wood, of course, so that I could take the wheel off to get at these nuts behind the plates, the door closed up at the top by about 1 millimetre, about 40,000ths of an inch, which I don't think is too bad for a car that's 60 years old. So that's not going to bother me at all. So all the aluminium plates are now screwed in place. There are 3 screws along the top of this threshold plate here and 4 along the edge there, and the interior piece there which covers over the draft excluder. Draft excluder wasn't too hard to fit, a little bit difficult in that corner there. You can see it doesn't quite squeeze up as well as I wanted there. I might still fiddle around with it there. It's a reverse angle and that makes it quite tricky, but it runs along here on the aluminium and then up the steel and over around the top here and is terminated underneath this capping. Now, this capping is the original one with the it looks white on the camera, but it's actually anodized but very badly scratched, so I think I'm probably going to polish these up. I might get them re-anodized, I don't know. And they sit on this is a wooden block underneath there which is screwed onto the steel and they sit on top of that, so that's all really quite interesting there. So there we go, and I think that that is probably a pretty good few days work. I'm pleased with it. It's come up very well, and I guess the next step is to fit on these little seals, cowl scuttle seals here, which I think are quite tricky. They're held in place with split rivets, and I might make a little video of that. See how we go. That's probably going to be the next instalment anyway, but there we are, and you can see the door gaps pretty pretty jolly good. So that's Christmas work, and compliments of the season to everybody.